There were rules in our house that no one ever had to say out loud. Don't speak when he's drinking. Don't look at her when she's disappointed. Don't cry where anyone can hear you. Don't be noticed. Don't be loud. Don't be a problem. Silence kept us alive. It was the kind of silence that thickens the air, that lowers the ceiling, that learns the exact shape of your breathing and waits for it to break. Our walls held that silence like lungs hold smoke. James understood the rules better than I did. He was 2 years older and careful in a way that didn't belong to a kid. He watched the house the way you watch an animal that might bite if you move too quickly. When the hall floor creaked wrong, when a drawer shut too hard, when a footstep dragged instead of landed, he would step in front of me without looking back, like it was the most natural thing a person could do. As long as I'm here, he'd say, low enough that only I could hear it, nothing will happen to you. He didn't say it to make me feel better. He said it like a promise he had already written on his own bones. When he said it, I believed him, because believing him felt like breathing air that wasn't cold. There was a night the rules failed. We weren't loud. We weren't anything. It started with the refrigerator door hanging open, a yellow light on the linoleum. A bottle rolled, glass against glass. The sound was nothing, stupid, small, and then the house moved the way I had always known it could. A shape in the doorway, a voice that didn't find words, just wait. James moved and everything else moved after him. I remember the sound, not shouting, not even a hit. A crack, thin, winter branch brittle. James fell sideways into the wall and slid down, blinking too slowly. He pushed me back with his hand, even on his way down. There was blood in the corner of his mouth like a red thread pulled through skin. I'm here, he whispered, breath almost gone. Don't, it's okay. The house went quiet in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't the silence that saves you. It was the kind that closes the door. In the morning, he was gone. No ambulance, no questions, no voice saying his name. His pillow was still warm when I pressed my face to it. There was a dent on his side of the mattress like he might walk in and lay back down and tell me school could wait. I waited. The hours bent. The house breathed and didn't answer. Then the posters went up, missing in red letters. His school picture, a phone number. The picture didn't look like him to me. The smile was too small and too straight, the eyes too bright. The paper looked wrong on telephone poles and grocery store doors, like a new layer of skin on something that didn't want to heal. People stared when they thought I wasn't looking. Teachers spoke softly and touched my shoulder with hands that never knew how to hold anything heavy. My parents didn't speak at all. They scraped plates into the trash and watched the television with their faces turned away from me, from each other, from the empty chair. They didn't take the poster off our fridge when the corner curled, when the tape yellowed, when the edges caught and tore. They let it become another layer of the house. I walked the routes the posters took me. The poles and mailboxes learned my hands. I smoothed the paper against metal when the wind peeled it back and held my breath when I smelled rain. Once I pressed my forehead to the picture and said, "Come back." The paper moved with my breath. That was all. The police came and filled lines on a form with tidy ink and left. A week turned into a month, then two. The searchlight swung somewhere else. The picture faded in the sun. The night he came back, I was awake and not sleeping was like standing up inside my own head. I'd stopped turning on the lamp. I didn't like how the light made the walls look. The air changed before anything else did. The temperature dropped the way an elevator drops when the cable slips, fast and breathless. My blankets felt wet with cold. The digital clock on my dresser flashed and died. The little noise the charger makes in the outlet stopped like someone took it apart with careful fingers. The mattress bent under a weight I knew, a familiarity so sharp my chest hurt. The dip was in the exact spot where he used to sit to tie his shoes. "Saki," he said. He was there. No glow, no see-through edges, no movie tricks. James sat on the edge of the bed with his shoulders tilted forward like he was listening. The light from the street made a pale outline around him. His hair fell into his eyes the way it always did. His clothes were the ones from the poster. There was dirt on the knees like he'd knelt somewhere and stayed there too long. His skin looked like it had been washed in thin milk. His eyes held a color that wasn't a color I knew, blue the way light feels deep underwater. When he smiled at me, it was the old smile, the one that kept me breathing. My throat closed. I reached out because I had to know, and his hand met mine, cold and solid. He took my fingers and wrapped them up like he always had. "I'm here," he said, the air fogged at the edge of his mouth with the words, "I told you." I didn't ask where he'd been. There were questions I understood I couldn't afford to ask without changing the answer I had just been given. He came and went. He never left the room through the door. I would blink and he would be sitting in the chair or standing in the hall, or I would wake up from a thin sleep and he would be beside me, watching like watching was a job that demanded both love and vigilance. Electronics broke around him or just stopped obeying. The phone lit with notifications and then froze with the light still on. The television threw static like bad weather and spoke in a voice that didn't belong to anyone in the room. The fish tank pump stalled and the water went still as glass. The cold followed him and then settled like a blanket. I learned to put my palm to the wall and wait for the tremor under the paint that told me he was there. My parents felt it before they admitted it. They paused in doorways as if the threshold had sharpened into a clean edge of ice. Light bulbs burned out when they flicked switches. The kerosene heater sputtered and died when they tried to warm the kitchen. Silence rearranged itself into a shape that looked like us. They moved around the house the way you move around a memory you don't want to step on. They started saying my name less, and then not at all. Sometimes I watched their mouths shape a word and stop. James could only touch me. I learned this by accident, which is to say I was 18 and stupid enough still to hope. I took his hand in the hallway one afternoon, a thin, mean winter day when the windows wept, and led him toward the kitchen where she sat at the table with a shred of that poster under her coffee cup. I thought, see? See him. See that he came back. See that I wasn't lying, that I wasn't a boy who made a man up to stand between himself and the world, because there was nothing else to put there. James slowed, not fighting my hand but not following either. She looked up when the shadow crossed the doorway. Her eyes widened, and I thought for a second that she saw what I saw. The light above the sink brightened and then dimmed and then went out with a sound like an insect dying. The radio on the counter crackled and a voice I didn't recognize said our names like a prayer or a curse. The temperature dropped. The window glass went white and small crystals crawled into the corners. She pushed back from the table so fast the chair legs screamed on linoleum. Her face went empty the way a room does when everyone has left. She left too. The coffee steamed alone, and the poster corner bled a wet ring into the wood. I felt James move beside me, but I didn't feel him let go. Later, when I tried to make him touch the back of her hand the way he steadied me, he didn't refuse, and he didn't obey. He simply wasn't there in that way for her. He existed where my hand held him. The cold stayed where my skin did. For a while, we lived like that. I learned to keep batteries in drawers and extra blankets folded clean. I learned which bulbs could handle the way the house shivered when he sat too close to the ceiling. He learned the routes I took to avoid the places where our parents liked to exist. We made a quiet in the quiet. I did my homework with a pen that wouldn't write and then would. I ate dinners that tasted like cardboard and didn't look up. When the adoption people came, they wore warmth like uniforms. Smiles shined and hands hovered, and words like opportunity and stability sounded careful in their mouths. Papers traded ink. Boxes swallowed our things. I had a new house threaded with a different kind of silence. The kind carpets make when no one has run on them yet. The rules changed, but only on the surface. I still learned to be small in the ways that kept other people from noticing the cold that came in with me. James followed without luggage. He sat in corners that didn't have dust and learned the new sounds a safer house makes. The hum of an old fridge that isn't angry, the cough of a heater that's trying, the terrible earnestness of people who mean well. My new parents couldn't see him, but they felt something they didn't have the words to tell me. They started closing doors gently. They slept with lamps on in a house that didn't need it. They watched me the way people look at thunderstorms in other towns. There was a night in the tunnel when I thought the dark would separate us the way the posters had. We were driving home in a storm that turned the windshield into a white wall. The wipers worked hard enough to sound like they were trying to climb out of their own bodies. The heater was on high, and the car still felt like a pocket of summer in a river of winter. Then the heat didn't feel like comfort. It felt like drowning. I cracked the window and the air that came in tasted like wet metal and stone. I saw James in the rearview mirror before I felt his hand. Two eyes, pale blue steady, looking not out the back window, but at me through the glass like light. My new father saw too. He gripped the wheel. The car jerked toward the wall and then away again. The dashboard lights went bright and then black. The radio went to static so loud it was almost a scream. Something hit us that didn't have a shape. Water, air, the night itself. And then the noise gathered itself into one sound. The slow grind of metal learning a new position. When I woke up, I was on the road in the rain. It was the kind that makes everything smell like it wants to be clean. The sirens were far and then near. James had his arms around me like he had fallen there and never meant to get up again. He pressed his mouth to my hair and said, "Shh," into the places where I still thought I was dying. Everything's all right. I believed him. I didn't look at the car. I didn't look at the shape under the silver blanket when the lights arrived and people moved with good intentions. I looked up at his face and watched the rain chart paths over skin that wasn't skin anymore. He held me until I stopped shaking, and the cold went from the inside of my bones back to the night where it belongs. After that, I started thinking about the truth I'd been walking around since the posters. He hadn't stayed because he didn't know where else to go. He'd stayed because I didn't. Every time the house breathed in a way that scared me, every time a corridor seemed too long, every time a voice tried to be louder than the person standing next to it, he put himself between. He wasn't trapped. I was. The slow change in me started like weather, something you only notice when you wake up and all the snow is gone. People said I was quieter, but I didn't think so. I was a different shape of quiet, the kind that measures a room, the kind that doesn't beg the silence to be kind because it knows it never will be. I kept my hands steady because he had. I kept my voice small because it moved better that way through places where heavy voices broke things. I learned I could walk through a whole day with the memory of his hand on my shoulder and not feel the need to apologize to the air. The old house didn't stop existing just because the new one did. I went back in the spring when the snow melt turned ditches into small rivers, and the posters had long since become pulp under tires. I walked up the steps with my palms flat so the wood would know it didn't need to creak. The door was unlocked. The kitchen smelled like the refrigerator had given up months before, and the sink had been trying to learn how to keep water from smelling like ghosts. They were both there, older and smaller, the way people look when they are waiting for an answer that never arrives. She stared at my hands when I came into the room. He stared at a point 6 inches to the left of my shoulder. The television showed a picture that didn't move. The sound was turned down low enough to be a heartbeat you couldn't count. I stood in the place I used to stand and felt James rise behind me like weather through the floor. They didn't flinch at me. They flinched at the cold that came with me. She reached for the light switch without looking, and the bulb inside the ceiling did the thing bulbs do when they are tired of pretending they know how to contain light. He opened his mouth and no words arrived for him to wear. "You shouldn't have let him disappear," I said. It came out steady. I didn't know I could make anything sound like that. I thought I would add something else. Anger or pleading, or all the sentences I'd already said to the house when it was empty. But there was nothing to add. The truth made its own weather. The room went dim the way rooms do when a cloud covers the sun. Their eyes moved as if they were tracking something across the wall that I couldn't see. James stood close enough for the hair on my arms to lift. He didn't say a thing. It was the not saying that made them understand. The back door opened even though no one touched it. The curtains breathed. The refrigerator knocked once like it had an opinion, then fell silent. I did not ask for anything. Forgiveness is a tool that looks like a candle and burns like a house fire if you put it in the wrong room. I knew what the posters had taught me, and what the tunnel had taught me, and what the bed taught me when it dipped under a weight the world could barely carry. I wanted to live. I left without closing the door. The air outside felt like a hand on the small of my back. He followed me onto the porch and down the steps and along the sidewalk until the street turned and the sun did that thing where it puts gold into puddles like coins. That summer, he came less. I would wake in the night and reach into the cold and find only the kind the air makes. The TV stayed obedient. My phone charged to 100%. I sat very still with the ordinary quiet and learned the edges of it, the difference between the kind that waits to hurt you and the kind that just is. When panic built in me the way it always had, I put my hand flat against the wall anyway and waited until the tremor came. And when it didn't, I breathed until my ribs ached and then eased. The last time he came, the storm didn't quite reach the house. The sky turned the thin color of a bruise, and the smell of rain was everywhere without the wet. I woke to his weight at the edge of the bed and knew it was the last time, the way you know when a song is ending, before the final note. He didn't speak. I didn't either. He took my hand and set it on his chest where a pulse would have been. The cold there didn't bite. It seeped. I could feel the shape of what he used to be beneath it. Boy, brother, warmth. He looked at me with eyes that weren't blue anymore, so much as they were the memory of blue. "You can go," I said. He blinked once, slow. His mouth moved like he wanted to smile, but remembered it wasn't necessary. He let go of me first. The bed rose under his weight in the way beds do when they're relieved to be nothing but furniture. He stood and the darkness stepped back for him, and then didn't. For a second he was all outline, and then he was weather again, cold and a thin smell like new snow. The lamp hummed, testing the idea of light, and held. My phone vibrated on the dresser once and showed the time like a held breath released. I didn't cry. It wasn't that kind of leaving. I live. That sentence looks smaller on the page than it feels in the body. I wake, eat, walk, work. I know what the grocery store hum sounds like when you aren't hungry and scared. I know which streets make traffic lights sound like rain at midnight. I keep blankets folded in a neat stack by habit and not need. I run my fingers along the edges of posters that aren't there anymore, when I pass the poles that used to hold them, and press my thumb to the splinters as if the wood remembers him. Sometimes the temperature drops for no reason. The glass sighs in the window frames. The television forgets what it was doing and then remembers. I don't panic. I say his name into the air like a blessing or a test. James. Most nights the quiet remains the kind that is neither friend nor enemy, just a room where I can hear my own breathing. On some nights I feel a hand touch my shoulder, light and precise, and I let it stay until it doesn't need to. People ask me about the missing posters because they find the old listings online sometimes, or because the town still wears a scar if you know where to look. I tell them I was the only one who kept the ink from running. I tell them he didn't run. He walked into the part of the house where the rules were written and didn't come back out until he knew I could. I don't tell them about the tunnel except to say there was a storm and we lived through it. When the rain is slow and the light is the color of old paper, I open the window and let the air in. The curtains breathe. The room changes temperature like a body. I think about the way he said my name, how it made something in me unclench even when the rest of the world was trying its best to tighten. I think about the promise he made before we knew what it would cost. As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you. And how he kept it in the only way promises like that can be kept, which is all the way to the edge and a little past it. I live. That is the end of the story, and the hardest part of it, I carry the house inside me where silence watches. I carry the warmth he had like a coin I won't spend because keeping it means I will always have it. I carry the poster edges under my fingernails. I carry the cold on my shoulder that says, when the air changes, you are not alone. Sometimes I wake because the mattress dips, and I say his name without opening my eyes. Sometimes there is nothing there but the ordinary weight of sleep. Sometimes the bed shifts just enough for me to feel how the world still leans, kindly, in my direction. When that happens, I turn my face to the room and breathe as if the walls are listening and want good news. I give it to them. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm still here. And somewhere that is not the house and not the tunnel and not this room, Something answers in a voice I know, and the quiet smiles like a scar that has learned how to bend.